right, welcome everybody. Looks like everybody's all good to go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tana, I'm
Thank
just
you.
gonna turn off your camera there for just so we can, not that we don't want to look at you, just so that everybody's just looking at the panelists. Hey, Carrie, gonna stop your video. Oh, you stopped it. Okay, sweet. All righty. All right, seeing as it's 9 after, we'll go ahead and get started. Hey, everybody. I'm sure more people will be kind of bumping in as we get going, but welcome. This is the Reimagining Our Industry panel, and today we're going to be discussing lots of different topics about the live sound industry specifically this time, but in just how we want to help reshape our future, what we want to look like going forward, and what we kind of didn't like before, and how we might rectify that in the near future. So I also want to thank ProSoundWeb and SoundGirls for kind of all of us kind of getting together and making this team effort to have this conversation. So thank you to Carrie and Erica and Keith Clark and countless others. So thank you guys. So in case you didn't know, I'm Samantha Potter. I'm an audio engineer and an author and a senior editor at ProSoundWeb. And additionally, I oversee the install and the commercial market for Allen Heath USA. My work with ProSoundWeb has led me to be the host of Church Sound Podcast, as well as a co-director and a lead instructor for Church Sound University. And of course, I'm a sound girl. So we have quite an esteemed panel joining us today, and let's not waste any time. Let's just start introducing them. So first we've got Alicia Henley, who is an audiovisual professional that found her passion at a young age as a sound engineer within her father's church. Now you can find her making connections within AV, digital signage, and IT, along with executing creative ventures. As a young professional, she's finding ways to bring AV technologies and creative visions together in the effort to leave her mark by making an impact. Jerry Palumbo has been a broadcast audio mixer and a specialist for the past 27 years in sports and entertainment. Prior to her work in broadcast, she spent years as a trained musician and an arranger on the music side of the business before going into post-production and eventually live broadcast. With a current focus on live remote broadcast events, Jerry's work has included the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, the NHL, NASCAR, Super Bowl, the World Series, the Stanley Cups, the Oscars, and more somehow. Entertainment shows have included The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, Conan O'Brien, and American Idol, just to name a few. She also won a Telly Award for mixing the live bluegrass show Songs of the Mountains. Jerry has worn the hats of broadcast engineer and mixer, field audio and RF tech, and communications, and most recently, broadcast A1 mixer for gaming and esports in Immersive Sound 5.1. Jerry served on the RF coordination committee for the NFL, NBA, in the NBA All-Stars, and serves in the same capacity for the Rose Bowl every year. Jerry's also worked on the NFL's enhanced audio team on its debut rollout. Phew, let me catch my breath. Next, we've got Bill Reeves. He's been working in the concert production industry for over 40 years. Starting out on the lighting crew, please keep your comments to yourself. I'm just kidding. He graduated to LD and production manager within a couple of years and has been working exclusively as a production and tour manager for more than 30 years. Highlights include Luther Vandross, Prince, Stevie Wonder, Anita Baker, Maxwell D'Angelo, Anthony Hamilton, and I'm sure there's more, as if that wasn't already a long list. Bill is the co-founder, along with Lance Jackson, of Roadies of Color United. Carlos Mosquera, born in Venezuela, has been passionate about music from a very young age. Through Venezuela's national system of youth and children's orchestras and choirs called El Sistema, a music education program that reaches 400,000 children, Carlos received his bachelor's in music. After playing with the symphonic orchestras and ensembles around the world, he then graduated with a BA in sound technology from the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts in the UK. After graduating, Carlos became immersed in music and sound technologies. He's been a recording and mixing engineer for organizations like the LA Philharmonic, the Colburn School of Music in Los Angeles, the Herb Alpert School of Music at UCLA, and Elisa applications engineer and developer for L Acoustic's new immersive audio technology. As an Elisa engineer, he has worked on numerous major shows such as Lorde, Lady Gaga, Childish Gambino, Alt J, LA Philharmonic, Deadmau5, Aerosmith, Bon Iver, Sleeping Beauty Dreams, Cages, among others. To boot, he developed a positional app for the visually impaired called Guiding Sounds, using inaudible impulses reproduced by speakers. It's an accessible, scalable, and cost-efficient solution that allows blind individuals to access real-time information of their location, enabling them to find exactly where they are and how to interact with the world in a whole, and how to interact within the world in a whole new way. No internet required. And finally, we have Sydney Wilson, who's got 40 plus years in the professional audio industry. Sydney's experiences include a multitude of positions, from touring as a front of house engineer, monitor engineer, and systems engineer. He also had stints in the nuclear power industry, MRI superconducting magnets industry, working on particle accelerators at Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory, and teaching audio electronics. In addition, he has experience in design and building recording studios. Though always pursuing other adventures, his heart is in audio, and in the last 10 years has been focusing on high-end professional digital console rentals, sales and service as the operations manager at High Tech Audio Incorporated, and starting a small company, Erivu Group, specializing in noise measurement, analysis, and solutions for large outdoor concerts and events. And those are our panelists today. Mine is I am standing on the shoulders of giants today. So I thank you guys so much for being here and being a part of this. It means a lot.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, this will be fun. All right, so this conversation is much larger than this panel discussion. This is just the beginning. Today, we're talking with professionals with well-established work who are known in their disciplines and local communities, movers and shakers, as it were. The world, and particularly America, seems so full of disdain and impatience, compounded with a lack of leadership and a lack of communication. While we can't solve the world's problems today, we're here to start doing the work of chipping away at the large block of marble that is this unformed, albeit free, industry. All of the reasons many of us join this industry are now the same reasons many of us are without work and without income. So let's take this once in a millennia chance to decide precisely what we want our industry to look like. So let's dig in. So as a first kind of question for everybody, what in your respective disciplines has been the biggest issue from pre-COVID in both kind of the technological sense, but also in the community, like work-life sense, in that same vein, we'll get that. Let's go around and just talk about kind of in your guys' disciplines, what's been the biggest issues for you, technological or otherwise, work-life?
Well, I don't mind going. I have fared fairly well over the past few years, obviously, but I would like to see a lot more female and more diversity and less sexism. It does exist. Even though 95% of my career has been hassle-free, it has not been without a lot of judgment that comes from us that have longer hair and might be of a different gender. I would like to see that change. I think there's been some pushback in my industry for the Me Too movement. I'm seeing a lot more people more willing to throw people under the bus that I did not see as much before. So this is just in my industry. From what I'm seeing on the concert side, there seems to be a lot more open arms to bring in more diversity that way. I would certainly like to see more people of color. And just basically all that we want, I think all that anybody wants is to be respected for the tool sets that you're bringing to the table. It's no different than anybody else that's to your left or to your right. It's what tool sets are you bringing to the table? We need to look at everyone's craft first and not the body that they encompass. So I would like to see that change. I would like to see the financial disparity change between female and people of color. And, it is what it is. That's a terrible term today. But I would like to see that talked about a little bit more. And the biggest one of all for me is, and I hope to get into the union aspect of this later in this discussion, but I would like to see the unions that are actually the gatekeepers on the front lines of this step up and fix some of these disparities, particularly in the broadcast side of the business, because you got to be in the union to do it. And then you have to have the skill set to be in the union, so it's like a catch-22. I
Yeah.
would like to see more training on that level, more opportunities on that level, instead of everyone scrambling for a piece of the cookie to have an opportunity. So that's what I'd like to see changed.
Gotcha. All right. Who next?
Yeah, I agree with Jerry on a lot of things that she mentioned. Of course, diversity in all facets that it could come in, right? But from a technical point of view, a main challenge was not learning the IT as we transition from analog to digital, and that's kind of what structured my pivot. And another thing that Jerry mentioned is the union. Like where I come from, I didn't even know what the heck the union was. If I had known what it was, my career would have went a different direction. But definitely the technical challenges, going from analog to digital. There's a gap there when it comes to the IT side, that's behind our audio consoles and lighting consoles. So that's been something that I've paid very close attention to from the technical side. Pre-COVID, during COVID, even before that, it was just something that was a challenge to almost every vertical as they transition to a digital setup.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, speaking specifically, well, let me start, by the way. As a former lighting guy, I have no idea what I'm doing with a bunch of sound people. I don't know
You're
how
contributing.
I got
Yeah, you're
I'm a lighting guy, and you're all sound guys or girls, and I'm confused. What am I doing here? Anyway, technologically, particularly in my particular line of work, there really isn't a big shift pre and post or during COVID, because as a tour manager, my main tools are telephones and emails. That's the you guys deal with consoles. I deal with emails, and that technology has been around in a long time. So I don't think technologically there's a big change. I will say technologically in my business, Zoom will be a major impact after, if there is ever an after, and we get back to work. This technology that we're using right now, the ability to have face-to-face conversations across the world, particularly, like I said, for me as a guy who does spends better than half my time advancing and calling people and emailing people and talking about, how many forklifts I need and how big is the stage and where am I going to put the trucks and the buses and when can I check into the hotel, and that's the stuff that I deal with. Having the ability to talk face to face with people, or a group of people, and particularly when we're putting a show together, and typically you're trading pieces of paper back and forth with the designers and the artists and the manager and the accountant and all of those, budget conversations and all of that kind of stuff. This technology right here will, I think, make a huge change in my particular work. But speaking more directly to the diversity conversation, clearly that's a big deal. That's why we and my partner started Roadies of Color United. There was a need for that kind of an organization. We started our group about 10 years ago, when me and KC, Lance Jackson, had a conversation and realized that in the then existing media of the day, PLSN or All Access, the magazines, front of house Front of House magazine and all the other magazines and sites, there weren't hardly any people of color mentioned or listed, or you never saw, if you saw a picture of a conference of the, you know, whatever, LDI or any of the get-togethers that existed at that time, there's always a bunch of white guys, and usually the same white guys. And my joke was that if an alien came down to the earth and wanted to learn about the concert production business and started reading the media of the day, they would not be aware that there was such a thing as Black people that were sound engineers, were lighting directors, that were carpenters, riggers, tour managers, et cetera, et cetera. And that was the impetus for us to start our organization. Clearly, with the pandemic and the two incidents, the incident of the pandemic, as well, the killing of George Floyd and the rise of the Black Lives Matter moment, has given everybody in our industry moment to reflect and to kind of look around, because it's unlike your Facebook person who said, you know, systemic racism is the communist plot.
Right.
It's a real thing. It's a real thing
Yeah.
in the country. It's a real thing in our industry. I mean, our industry is part of the larger culture. So the things that affect the larger culture obviously affect us in our little corner of the world. And it's kind of brought everybody to a realization that there is an issue, and there are disparities, and there are inequalities, and as Jerry was saying earlier, you know, people aren't just judged on their skill sets. They're also judged on the color of their skin and their gender when it comes to getting jobs, you know, which is at the end of the day, what we're all interested in is what are we going to do for our next gig? And because that's how we make our living, that's how we pay for our house and put food on the table, et cetera, et cetera. So at the end of the day, it comes down to money, it comes down to jobs, and having access to a fuller range of jobs rather than being sequestered in one little corner of the industry is what we hope comes out of all of this once we get back to work, whenever that is, hopefully sooner than later. Hopefully, you know, it's months from now and not years from now. But the diversity issue, I think, for us in this business, particularly in my area, because I'm a guy who hires people, you know, and I'm dealing with other people who hire. Hopefully, at the post-COVID, there will be enough of this momentum that's being generated right now, that won't get lost in the when we all go back to work and we all get excited and say, "Oh boy, I gotta run out the door and go do a show." Hopefully, all of the conversations that are being had right now won't be lost in the rush to get back to work, and there'll be some change or some improvement in the issue of diversity in hiring in the concert production business. So
Absolutely. And we'll be touching on that just a little bit more on how we can achieve that. But Carlos, Sydney, you know, biggest issues you've seen in your disciplines?
Well, Sydney, if you want to go first.
No, go ahead.
Oh, if I may add something, I would like to see more like artists working on pro of the community, like creating campaigns. I would like to see that because they are the voice. We need more people acting proactively and, you know, raise support and awareness to end gender inequality, domestic violence, and sexual abuse, things like that. And you don't see many. Like I've toured with I'm like, I've seen it. Like, I don't know, Bon Iver is one of them. Like, I see like they're actively doing something actually useful because they have to use the music as a tool. Like, music is about what you, it's about the meaning. And sorry, I'm kind of like, and it's about the meaning. So to me, I would like to listen to Bon Iver more just because they do this. So it's just like, it depends how you see it, how do you see music, but to me it's in that way. So I would like to see more musicians doing actually something useful, or artists in general. It doesn't have to be musicians. Like Banksy just funded a boat for the refugees in the Mediterranean Sea. So it's like, it's easy, guys. Like, you have the voice, use your fame to do something useful. That's it. On the technical side, well, and which is technically my job too, is I want to make people to move from stereo to multi-channel experiences, which to me, it's gonna make the industry move forward in a way that we made stereo the standard, which I don't know why that happened at some point, but it's time to actually move forward because we have the means, we have the technology, we have the processing. So I'm trying to do that right now.
I think everyone's kind of hit on the two main topics are technology and diversity. In my experience in this industry, my first show was 1974. And in looking at what's changed from that point till now, it's been a very, very slow change. And so in my view, the industry is a microcosm of what's happening in our country and what's happening on the planet. And so that being said, our industry is still about folks that like freedom. We like what we do. We've all drank the Kool-Aid. Everybody loves the show. But at the end of the day, our industry is very, very much like the rest of the country. And so for those of us of color that have traveled around the country, you see the same kind of stuff you see outside of the industry. I couldn't get a gig in San Francisco in 1974, 75. It took me a while before someone would actually hire me. So I worked for free so that they could see that I had the skill level. So those were some of the things that we had to deal with. With respect to technology, I'm a big advocate of education. And I think that our industry, we need more education. Everybody wants to get to the mix, but there's so much that we don't know. And our industry is constantly evolving. When you look at it relative to other industries, we're relatively small. And so we have outside influences. Like, I'd like to choke the person that brought the RJ45 to our industry, because we, right? Any audio engineer that has had to run a snake, you know that an RJ45 is an awful connector, right? But from an education standpoint, we don't have enough influence in our own industry to dictate what direction technology is going to go. And so now all of a sudden we have an RJ45 that we're all dealing with, when in fact, the reality is we probably should have gone to fiber before we went to RJ45. So I'm a big advocate of technology and understanding the fundamentals behind it. In our industry, on the audio side, there's a lot of folks in our industry who don't understand the difference between different signal levels. They don't understand impedance. They don't, even though you go to school, there's a significant amount of information that is not correct. And we see that a lot with consoles. We see that a lot with electricity, understanding three-phase, understanding all of those things. Education for us and for the world that I'm in, and folks that know me, is that we're talking about this all the time. And so education with respect to our technology is what is a big one for me going forward, because the technology is not going to change. I mean, in fact, it's getting faster. Most of the consoles that we deal with all have FPGAs. FPGAs didn't exist 5 or 6 years ago in our industry, or 10 years ago in our industry. Most people didn't even know what that meant. And so it is a it's a massive impact on our industry. And interestingly enough, almost every major console has FPGAs installed in them. And so that technology and understanding it and understanding how it impacts and how things are shifting and changing in fiber optics and RF and 5G, all of those pieces are going to impact us. So anyway, that's my take.
I would like to just jump in there real quickly to add to that, not to go down this technical pathway and get diverted, but I concur with you 1000% with the whole Dante. The Dante network and things like that are fantastic for antennas and attenuators and things that you have to do at distances like that. But when you think about the technology, it makes our lives a lot better. It's easier connectors, but it's all software driven. So if something goes wrong, it goes wrong all over the place. I have been a huge advocate, exactly what you said about looking at the fiber first, looking at this more in a subset instead of the criteria of being primary, but that's another discussion. But I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Well, I think fiber is going to get obsolete soon anyway with 5G. So it's going to be a...
We'll see.
We'll see. That's
well, it's going to get cheaper.
But we'll see.
It's going to get cheaper for sure.
Bandwidth is changing. Yeah.
So, okay, Sydney, well, I've kind of got your attention here. In that same sort of vein, where do you expect this industry to kind of go next? Like, where do you see the next 3 years kind of looking like from a technological standpoint?
There's a couple things. I mean, just recently we had a customer dealing with Dante. I as an example, Dante is a great platform, and it's but there are some issues with it and how it's implemented. And I think from a systemic standpoint, when you implement those types of technologies, you have to be mindful of what the downsides are. And as an example, one of the downsides of Dante, as good as it is that if you make a mistake or a hiccup in a very large system, and Bill, you're a tour guy, so 1 minute of downtime because somebody crossed the primary and the secondary, or someone unhooked something and put it back in, the way the internet protocol or the IP protocols work, 1.5 minutes is death for an audio engineer. So I'm not necessarily the best person to talk to or be an advocate for Dante as a systems control. So I have some issues with that. But in terms of your question of where technology is going to go, I think what we're going to be looking at is faster technology, faster digital technology. One of the things that we've seen from a console side, as an example, is we used to think that that we were trying to get consoles smaller, right? And you could get consoles and go layer to layer, but when you look at it, we've gone back to consoles being fairly large again because the engineers want to have their hands on everything. They don't want to have to push 2 buttons to get to their star, as an example, or get to a kick drum when you got 20 background vocals. So the consoles used to be lighter. All of a sudden now you get a large console and they're still 800 pounds. So I think
Looks like he got a little bit frozen, but we'll see if we'll get him back. Carlos, if you know, I would also be really interested in your perspective while we're waiting on Sydney.
Well, he was talking about faster, and I think we're fast right now. We're fast. I think we need to be more reliable. That's what we need to do right now. Yes, things should get lighter. You should move them faster in a way, like you should wait less. I agree with that. But I think the industry, the live music industry, is in what it's supposed to do right now. If I'm thinking ahead in, I don't know, next 4 or 5 years, as I mentioned, like 5G, I think it's gonna be mind blowing, or 6G by then maybe. And together with AR, together with machine learning, specifically reinforcement learning. If you add all that together, it's gonna be insane. I don't think we're prepared for that, because right now, like what he was talking about, fiber, yeah, it's wired, and we can get wireless. And when it gets wireless, we have more access to different environments. So to me, the new technologies, it's not just one thing, it's a combination of a lot of things. And bringing experiences at home, which we're doing it right now because of COVID, we're trying to get used to that. And maybe some people are gonna get used to that and gonna get, I'm fine at home. I can experience a concert at home. I've done that with VR. And it feels great. It's not the same, but it can be improved in the next few years. So it depends on you. It depends on what's your opinion on that. Yeah.
I definitely have some opinions on this, because I am seeing that my industry is significantly changing. Some of these were in play before COVID, and now they're just full blown. I'll give you a good example. A lot of the things that are going on in the bubble. For the NBA. You do have limited staff that's there. You do have cameras, you do have audio there, but there's an awful lot of people working from home that are. So normally for us in a broadcast environment, we show up in a broadcast truck and we have the switcher and the audio and the A1. We have everything that interfaces with the stadium right then and there. And then we do what's called backhauling, is how you deliver it out of there. It's either by satellite, fiber, or other. I see, this is just my own prediction, that there's going to be a lot more IP backhauling, less satellite. I think there's going to be more satellite for news, breaking news and things like that, where you need to get things up and out quickly. But I see IP as being a game changer in the broadcast industry. It's already, I mean, a lot of things. US Open, there is a limited staff that's there, and they are cutting some of that there. But not everything that you see is being cut from the stadium now. For example, Turner, and this was some years ago, Turner cut a PGA in Britain all out of Atlanta, and they had limited staff there. So the reality check is, for people who are trying to break into the broadcast business, keep in mind that that is significantly changing as we speak.
Yeah, a perfect example of that would have been the Democratic Convention. Because I'm not a broadcast person, but I know some guys, etc. And that was like, everybody was at home. The switcher was in his living room in Atlanta, and the engineer was in his basement in LA. And I mean, because it was all virtual, everybody was everywhere, and yet the finished product on screen was pretty seamless. As opposed to, like you said, when you normally at a big event like that, you'd have 38 trucks out in the parking lot somewhere and 150 people all beavering away in their various trucks. At the DNC, there was no broadcast village as far as I can tell.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And it was all IP except for the final delivery.
Yeah. But the finished product was good.
Yep,
I mean,
absolutely.
as somebody sitting in front of my TV, I couldn't tell that was the work of 18 different people in 18 different areas of the country, all working from their living rooms or their basements. So that's a. And let me just address the from my standpoint as a tour manager, speaking about the march of technology. The one thing that impacts my world and has in the last few years, and I assume will continue to, is the continuing reduction in size and weight, because I'm the guy that has to figure out how many trucks I need to put stuff in. And of course that impacts the budget and the timing, et cetera, et cetera. And as solid state technology has taken over, particularly the sound industry, but also the lighting industry, with the rise of intelligent lighting, and obviously in sound, instead of hauling around, 50 S4s the size of refrigerators, I'm now hauling around 50, trapezoidal boxes of a third or a quarter of the size. So in my world, the increasing or decreasing size and weight of gear in general, you guys were talking about fiber optic cables and stuff, I'm all for it because it's a lot lighter and takes up less space than copper wire going everywhere, so that
Sure.
will.
And it's cleaner.
And it's clean. I mean, it's all the obvious. It's quicker, it's faster, it's cleaner, it's lighter, it's easier to handle. I don't need to send 5 stagehands to the truck to roll out a cable box. Now I just send one guy to go get that cable box. I don't need to get a forklift to get a stack of cable boxes in the door. I just send a couple guys, they push a couple boxes in, boom, we're done. So
I wanted to share something with you guys. I'm sorry, I don't know what happened with my connection, but on the acoustic measurement side, as an example, is that we had an issue. The way we operate is that we look for, we're doing acoustic measurement, but the way that we do this, as an example, is we do it in multiple locations. So inside the venue, outside the venue. So you look at your measurement location and an impact zone. And by doing that, we offer the customer as a 2 to 7 minute window to make a change or to respond to a noise complaint. And what that requires is high-speed connection. And so over the last 5 or 6 years, that didn't exist. And we've all been in these situations where you're at a concert and you get a phone call from the tour manager, or you get a phone call from the head of the audio company, and you can't get through because the internet has been bogged down. And so when that initially happened, we had to figure out a way for us to stay online when everybody else wasn't. And so we ended up buying a satellite, what is called a KU band satellite, just like you see at the broadcast. And so that gave us an internet access during a concert where all the teenagers were doing the TikTok and the Instagram, and everybody's online at that time. And so I bring this up because last year, or end of or early 2019, 20 different satellites were put up. The current satellites that are in orbit around the Earth, as an example, have been up. Some of them have been up since the 70s. And so they just had a bunch of satellites that were in low geosynchronous orbit. And so what that means is that there's some new technology that has not come to our industry yet that I believe will. And so you have all of these small satellites in geosynchronous orbit that are super fast, and they're closer. The satellite that we link up to when we use it is 23,000 miles away. So it's a ways away. And so now with these satellites that are coming into service very soon, I believe it's going to shift our industry. And so back to that education question is understanding internet protocols. IPv6 is going to be coming up, and we see it all the time on our computers. Every one of us has seen it. We see IP4, and we all use that. But 6 is going to come. And the use of 6 is going to come, and the use of these satellites is going to come. The question is how is it going to impact our industry? And I'm only looking at this simply because this was, as most of our technology in our business has come, is through a need, right? It's come. We need to have faster access. We need to. When we were talking about fiber earlier, one of the biggest things that came out from high tech audio, where I do this work with these consoles, is are these fibers robust enough? And they were always fearful because 100 meters worth of fiber weighs about 22 pounds. 300 or so feet of snake weighs significantly more than that. and it's a lot heavier. So when we send 2 fibers in a small Pelican case, it's 66 pounds. And so we have this conversation early on with touring companies and say, hey, now you only have to run enough AC to power your console and your front of house gear, but you also now only your return snake and everything is in the fiber. And so now from a touring standpoint, that number goes down dramatically, or your weight goes down dramatically, size goes down dramatically, speed goes up, ground loops go away. So those are some massive advantages that we didn't have 25 years ago or 15 years ago. And so, yes, I think RF is going to be a big deal, but I don't think fiber is going away. Dark fiber is still used on all the major concerts because the way that these large ISP providers operate is that all the data comes in serially to these towers and link towers. It's not a parallel processing. So whatever signal gets there first, and I can tell you this from my own experience, is that the one that's going to get there first are going to be the first responders. It's going to be hospitals, it's going to be police, it's going to be fire and safety. And so they will get priority with respect to IP when getting to these cell towers. So it all goes in a serial fashion. So to make the assumption that this technology is going, fiber is going to disappear, it's not for a while. We did a show a few years ago, and I'll stop here. But we did a show a couple of years ago where they linked 2 cities together, and most of these big ISP servers will use what is called dark fiber, and it's fiber that is linking cities together. So you have the ability to have multiple shows, multiple church services going on simultaneously in 2 different cities connected via fiber. So I think as we move forward with this, all of us that are involved in this industry, the more technology that you understand and the more fundamentals you understand around that, and the young people that we are mentoring, they need to understand this information. They need to understand it all, because almost every technology that exists on the planet is embedded in the things that we use on a daily basis, from battery power to AC to fiber to fast RF. All of it that exists in the outside world exists inside of our world, and we have to put it up at the beginning of the day and take it down at the end of the day. So it behooves us to have staff that have a depth of understanding that they understand this technology across the board.
We're seeing a lot of what I've noticed in my years in the audio industry is that the science and the math that we're using is very old. It takes quite a long time for our industry to figure out how to use the technology. So all this new stuff that's coming out, hopefully we do adopt it very soon, but it might be, a hot minute before we actualize it. But I would really like to hear from Alicia on this. You are in a kind of a different discipline, AV, as well as, more of the traditional audio engineering side. So what's it look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason why I pivoted. I was, I'm a sound girl at heart from day one. Running front of house audio within house worship sector. And one thing that I learned very quickly is the more that I knew beyond just audio, the more I grew career-wise. So that's when video came into play. Because why? The church I was working for, we started growing and we were streaming to campuses because the pastor can't be in 3 places at one time. And I was like, wow. So when my internet goes down, we're all screwed. And then I actually started working at a campus for a school, which was a multi-purpose facility, and it had stadium, theater, conference center, and all of these places were all connected as far as the digital signage signals went, our audio, everything was connected over fiber through switches with Dante or NDI, all these different types of technologies. And again, when the internet went out, we were screwed. So I realized, okay, as an operator, as a technician, if I don't transition to learn the language of IP, I'm going to be out of a job soon here. And then we started seeing that happening across all the verticals, not just in AV, and concerts and everything. So from the IP standpoint of where the future, where we're going, I totally agree with Sydney. Like fiber's not going anywhere. We're just getting started with this stuff, and it's only going to get better. So we need to pay attention to Dante. Yes, it's new. We might not like everything about it, but it can only get better, right? The software is going to get better. Also, NDI is huge in broadcasting. Like that platform is going to go maybe even further than Dante someday. We don't really know where we sit at right now, but between Dante and NDI, I say pay close attention to those. And if you want to get into any one of our verticals, pay attention to those technologies, go to those trainings, learn the language, educate yourself, because as everything continues to go remotely, those two platforms and the software and all the technology that is rolled up in these packages are going to be super valuable as, you know, our industry continues to transition across the board.
I can add to the NDI thing from a broadcast perspective is we're not seeing as much in the broadcast side as we are in the esports side. We use NDI all the time in esports, and what NDI basically is, for those who don't understand it, when you have a local network at home and you have ports, and you have ports for your printer, and you have ports for 3 printers, and you got 2 computers physically on those ports, right? And you go, well, I want to grab my video off of my Mac that's sitting over here in the studio, but I want to print over there on the Canon printer. What you can do with NDI, it's virtual ports on a local network. So you can go and you can grab sources from anywhere you want, and you can route them to anywhere you want. So it's basically virtual ports on a local networking system, just to let you know. But we use it all the time in a profound way in esports. Some in traditional sports. Traditional sports is still, there is still copper, believe it or not, at some of these stadiums. There's still a lot of fiber. They've been pushing Dante. That's one of the things, Sydney, while you were away, I kind of got into that whole IPKU band satellite aspect. There is a healthy mix of that in traditional broadcast, because in traditional broadcast, they're going to go with what's going to work. You know, they're not going to start trying too many things live on the air in an NFL game if they know the tried and true is working. We do see a lot of fiber. We do see a lot of Dante. I have seen Dante fail on a major network, and it failed for an entire hole of golf because the software went down. That's the downside of Dante.
I've had that happen myself in the middle of a show. Can't do anything. The whole thing just freezes up, goes down.
And I believe that Dante has its place. And like I said, when you're running long distances with the here we go with the RJ11 and RJ45 kind of concept, is that you can, okay, I totally agree with that. It's easier for us cable-wise because we were just talking about how heavy copper is. But I think Dante has its place. I don't know it needs to be primary for us, because I think sometimes marketing and the first out of the gate is sometimes what takes off, and sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. Again, when it comes to long antenna runs, if you're doing a lot of RF and you need to hit a lot of different spaces, like I said, a lot of attenuation down the line, it's fabulous for that. So anyway, that's just my opinion on that side of it.
We gotta pay attention. We gotta pay attention to what makes it easier for us. But go ahead, Carlos.
Dante is good. Dante is a really good technology. Audio over IP has been improved lately with ABB.
Yeah,
ABB. So that's why actually ABB came along, because Dante has its issues, and major brands got together and created Milan, which is it's going to be, or it is the standard for audio over IP on the live industry. And so
the problem that they're running into is that they're locking it down because it's built by manufacturers, right? You can only use certain switches, certain things. People want to be, you know, they want to have the freedom to use whatever they want to use, and it actually work with all these different sectors. I mean, ABB is great as well, but you know, all of these are still new.
You're talking about switches right now. So if you have, you have to have a Dante approved device to run Dante. So you're talking about manufacturers anyway. So my point is, like, yeah, you have to have a specific switch, but that's why it becomes reliable, because you have to have a specific switch. So it's like, it's not a paradox, but it's like, yeah, it's a loop, like, yeah. So that's why that's the point of Milan. So let's create something that is reliable and it's gonna work for the live industry, basically.
That comes back to standards, right? And like
That's
what he implemented at the beginning of the conversation, education, standards, do we really have any?
But it's still open source though. So it's like,
at the end of the day, you know, we're talking, this translates into into a financial question or statement. If you lose a minute and a half because Dante or a computer has to reboot and it's a broadcast, somebody's getting fired. And so from that perspective, our industry, we have to have backup. We have a lot more leeway in a live situation to do that, but in a broadcast or video or live video from a church service, something like that, esports, downtime of 30 seconds is a long time. So having a tried and true primary system and a viable, fast backup, those are the things that actually work. And so some of the technology that we have right now works. Dante is fantastic. It is fantastic on a bunch of levels, but there's some things that it just simply doesn't work for because of it is a computer and it takes time if it goes down. And so it's the same question that came up years ago when they had line array. Line array is fantastic, but it doesn't work for every application. In fact, we had line array. Bill, you remember this? Line arrays were the column speakers, right? I mean, those existed in 1970s, and they were the Shure column speakers. So they work in certain applications and others they don't. And so we have to be careful from a technology standpoint to not be caught up in the marketing side of it and understand the fundamentals and understand the basics of the technology that we're trying to implement.
I have a question though. Why do you say the line arrays don't work though?
I didn't say that. I didn't mean to say that.
Sorry, in which scenarios they don't work?
In certain scenarios they don't work. Trapezoidal boxes work better. And that's just that. Okay. Technology wise, I mean, they don't work in all applications. So a recording studio, as an example, you don't use a line array when you're in close proximity to a speaker. You're 3 feet away or 4 feet away. A line array won't work. Yeah, but I mean, you're comparing a recording studio with a live. No, I'm not. I'm just my point is that we could debate this all day in terms of technology. But the bottom line is that it becomes a financial decision for all of those, for our customers, for the people that we work for, that if a technology works, the promoter could give a crap. They don't care. What they care about is, are the fans happy? Is it on time? Do they like the music? And am I making money? If you go down, when Dante first came out as an example, I would get these calls every Saturday night, right on my first cocktail at 8 o'clock, it's showtime. And someone would make a mistake and swap the primary and secondary on the Dante network when it first came out. And I'd say, you're gonna have a problem, you need to reboot. I can't do it, that doors are open. And I would constantly say, you gotta reboot, it's gonna take a long minute and a half, but you gotta reboot the system right now. And they didn't do it. And this happened probably once or twice a month for about a year until engineers started to understand what you have to do. You can't make certain kind of changes when the show is live with Dante. So anyway, those are things that we see on an ongoing basis, and it comes down to a financial situation, a financial decision at the end of the day, in my opinion, on all of these. If line array works and it sells tickets, then they will use it. If it doesn't, they won't. If fiber optics will continue to make it easier for tour managers like Bill to reduce his truckload, then he will use it.
Another issue you were saying it comes to finance. Don't forget capital investment for the vendors. So you have a sound company who invests hundreds of thousands of dollars in a particular kind of board or a particular kind of speaker system, or amplification and wires and the whole thing. They got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars invested, and some new technology comes out and they're still paying on the old stuff that they just bought last year. They're not going to just they're not going to toss all that stuff into a dumpster and run out and buy the new, it's shiny, bright, new, it's faster, it's cooler,
Sure.
it's groovier piece of technology, be it speakers or amps or processing or cabling or whatever, because they got a gazillion dollars already. They're still paying the debt load on the stuff they bought last year or bought 2 years or 5 years ago. So the rate of change, everybody was saying the rate of change in the industry is very slow. And one of the primary reasons for the rate of change being slow is that the vendors, who are the primary purveyors of this technology, of the actual gear, they got severe financial issues to deal with. They're paying off the $1.5 million worth of gear that they bought last year or 2 years ago. They're not going to run right out and buy the new, cool, groovy, faster, lighter, whatever it is that is being marketed this year. So you have a inertia built up in the system that's always going to slow down the rate of change.
Yeah, and that goes back to what Sydney said from the beginning, right? Verticals and money. Because in your case, that might not work. But when I technically worked for a school district, right, we have to spend those dollars. Oh, new D Lives coming out.
Well, yeah, right. In
So,
your kind of a situation, it's
yeah,
a
it
different
depends on
story.
vertical, just like with the technologies that we spec, and it's all about experience, right?
Yep.
So as a final kind of comment, just before we pivot to a new topic, I want to really put some emphasis on education. It's only going to get more complicated to catch up if you keep putting it off. So there's so much free online learning right now, or very affordable learning. There's like no excuse anymore. You need to, if you want to have a long, successful career in this industry, you're going to need to learn some things other than strictly just the basics of audio, and that's okay. It might be a little rough at first, but we'll get there. So to kind of, as I said, pivot a little bit, I want to focus a little bit on work life, because that's such a huge thing that we can have such a direct effect on. So some other issues that have been noticed over the years as they related to work life are kind of like the huge race to the bottom, getting paid enough, making a profit, or, heaven forbid, saving some money. How are you guys finding all the pay structures pre-COVID, and what are some ways that we can demand more for ourselves as the world inevitably sort of opens back up?
Good question. This is a subject that has sort of bedeviled us ever since there was an industry, because there are no, unlike other industries, and this will kind of swing into and out of the whole union question. In a non-union situation, particularly in my side of things, for touring, there has never been a standard of pay for any particular job. Most industries have some kind of a standard. If you are at this level, you get paid this much. If you're at that level, you get paid this much. If your workload takes this much time, you get paid. And if your workload takes that much time, you get paid. The one thing that I always tell people is that I do the same amount of work for a 1 truck show as I do for a 10 truck show, because I have to make the same amount of phone calls, and the only difference is when I'm advancing a show, I'm either asking for, if I'm advancing a labor call, I'm either asking for 8 guys, 18 guys, 28 guys, or 80 guys. But the amount of work I'm doing to get that done is the same. It's a phone call and an email, just the numbers change. I got 2 trucks, I got 10 trucks. Doesn't matter. My job stays the same. However, obviously my pay varies depending on the size of the tour. So there's a difficult question here, is that you do the same amount of work, put in the same amount of time, but you either get paid more or less depending on the size of the tour and the available revenue, because obviously the money we get paid depends on the amount of money that's coming in. So a little tour is only going to make this much money. A big tour is going to make that much money. Your little slice of that pie can vary. And then of course there's the whole issue of practice. You know, well, this is what we've always paid for front of house. You know, this is the last 3 guys we paid this much money to, you know, and that's what we're going to pay you. Yeah, but I'm I'm more experienced, and I'm going to give you a better show. It doesn't matter. I'm still going to pay you what I paid the last 3 guys that got fired for doing a shitty job. You're going to get that same money, and you're going to do an amazing job, but you're getting paid the shitty money. So, and then I don't know that there's, unless you get to the point of negotiating with the industry as a whole, to establish some base numbers for positions and jobs. And I'm not quite sure how you get that done, you know, so that if you have this many years as a front of house guy and you've done this many first class or second class or third class tours, you know, you have some demonstrated qualities and abilities, then you should get this much money. That I don't know how that happens unless you're in, like I said, you know, like the union thing, where they make a deal with the promoter or the building or whoever it is, to pay this much money, and the stage manager gets that much money, the production manager, the stagehand, the grip, the whatever, or like in the broadcast business, there's kind of standards. If you're an A1, you get kind of somewhere in this range. If you're an A2, you get kind of in this range. But in the concert business, there's none of those structures. I suspect in times to come there will be, but I think it's a ways away from us, because in the concert business, you know, using the word union is like, you know, anathema to people in the concert business, particularly to the promoters, who ultimately have to bear the weight of that number, and also the artist, because you are working most of the time, you're working directly for the artist, who then pays you according to how much money he's managed to convince the promoter to give him. So it's a complex problem, but you know, and then of course there's the economy. You know, what's the how much does it cost to live nowadays? When I first started in the 70s, and Sydney, you said your first show was in 74, as was my first tour. You know, I got $500 a week. I thought I was rocking, you know, at $500 a week. I thought that was amazing money. And of course, you know, the economy and the cost of living has changed, and that's not even per diem now. So all of those things go into figuring out how much you should get.
So perhaps the answer lives not within necessarily a industry answer, but perhaps an education standpoint, and everybody who gets involved, you know, who ends up being a part of a negotiation can be a better representative for themselves and a better advocate for themselves. And maybe that's the answer.
Yeah, I think that's the answer. I think eventually, and I think this is years from us now, is that there will be some sort of kind of structure in place that vaguely gives an idea of how much you should get, or how much money a particular job pays. But I think that's years, excuse me, years from now, because
Bill,
it's such a, it's such a huge issue. And you get paid, the same guys do the same job and get paid wildly different numbers on tour.
I think though, I agree with everything you said. I think one of the things though that we have to be mindful of is that, at the end of the day, these are business decisions, right? When you go into a large concert, when we started our little business, one of the things that you find out very quickly is liability, right? So when you talk about liability and large concerts, when you talk about, for us, when we talk about a tiny little company like the one I own, is we have to put up these remote devices inside the city limits. And so how do I do this? I don't have employees. I have 1099 workers. In the state of California, 1099 is getting attacked on multiple levels.
Yeah, I was going to say good luck on that.
So when you start to look at it from that perspective, I think that the standards and best practices that are going to impact our industry are really going to come from the top down, because liability ultimately is going to lie with the person that is renting that space, that promoter. And so we are now in an age where we have the first publicly traded company in our business. Most everyone that's in our business, these are privately held organizations. And so now you got Live Nation, as an example, is a
publicly traded.
It's a publicly traded company, and because it is a publicly traded company, their liability goes up.
Yeah.
They also make decisions based on what their investors need.
Right.
And so that's going to trickle down to all of us.
And they have to answer to their investors and their shareholders.
That's correct. And so when you look at how a PA is put up in San Francisco versus Las Vegas versus a small market like Boise, Idaho, the best practices and standards from a financial standpoint, in my opinion, are going to be the same.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But you may not have IATSE in that area. I don't know. But
that also kind of goes into another question that I sort of wanted to ask was about like work security, safety practices, insurance, and retirement and things like that. That wraps up with that. Those are four super heavy hitting topics that, have been few and far between for our industry pretty much since its inception. So I guess are unions or publicly traded companies the best way for us to obtain all of these things? What can we do on a micro scale individually, and what can we do, if anything, on the macro scale?
I have a lot of opinions about this. First of all, I certainly don't want any aspect of this to be taken out of context. I'm obviously pro-union for a lot of reasons. For the very things that we just talked about: insurance, fair pay, negotiating skills, tier level things. Some issues I do have with unions is that I am seeing an awful lot more in the metropolis that I'm in right now here, not so much nationwide, of a lot of people that are in these unions that have no skill sets.
Yeah.
And they're not held accountable whatsoever, and you can't do anything with them. I had an A1 who brought in his, and I'm not kidding you, his stripper girlfriend onto a set, an ABC set, threw her into this job that she was throwing cables at me going, what is this cable? And he forced me to teach her. And I was like, that's an RCA cable. What is this cable? And I said, that's an XLR cable. She didn't even know the connectors. And we couldn't do it. There was this ginormous fight to get her out of there because he lied about her skill set. He threw her in a job that she wasn't ready for, and we couldn't do anything with her. Yeah. So here's my issue with the unions. The unions need some restructuring too, because I have a problem if the brotherhood takes care of their brothers when the brothers are inept. What are we going to do about that?
Right.
And that to me is not acceptable. The other aspects of the union are great when they take care of you. And I have been on several shows where there were blatant sexist abusers, a big show that shall not be named here, a very big show, a well-named show. This guy kept getting in trouble, in trouble, in trouble, in trouble, in trouble. He was constantly being sent up the food chain to the coordinating producers, and the union would come in and rescue him every single time.
Yeah.
These are the issues that I have with that. The other aspect of the union that I have a problem with is training new people of diversity and people and women and bringing them in so that there is a nice, healthy spread of opportunities. Because it's, again, what, like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, is that you have to have skill set to get in, except in this case. If you know somebody and you get your stripper girlfriend who later found out to be a stripper, ABC almost lost their mind. They're like, how did this happen? I'm like, well, people need to do their due diligence. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But people who, really good training programs and the really good diversity of the people coming in. And then the flip side of that is, if you're coming in young, or you're coming in new, or you're coming in with a different kind of skill set, I've been in this business 30 years. Do not come in that you know everything. You don't know everything. I don't know everything. There are people who are experts that are here that are willing to help you and teach you everything that they know. Do not come in with the attitude that you know everything, because that's not helping your team out any either. So somewhere in the middle of that hash that I just threw out there, unions need to step up and be responsible for the bad guys, meaning have some kind of internal police force of your own with the unions, that you weed out the bad stuff and not protect anybody at all costs. I mean, there needs to be some accountability
Right.
for that.
I mean, that's why I said in my business, the union conversation is always a prickly one, because,
Yep.
and to speak directly to your issue, and it's kind of, and you're right, there's the stuff about the union that's great, like the insurance and the pensions and the welfare. That's fabulous. The downside is, like you said, when you get incompetent, inept people who are there strictly because they're the son of, the uncle of, the girlfriend of, the daughter of, the son of, whatever.
Right.
And a lot of times that works out. You know, there's a lot of times, because I've been around long enough, where I've worked with the father, and then, 10, 15 years later, I'm working with the son who has been taught by the father or the uncle or whoever the correct stuff, and who's just as competent, just younger and a little more peppy, and,
Right.
and that's fine. And I find that that is a local by local situation. Like, there are locals where everybody is super competent and knows their stuff, and you just sit back and let them go because
Right.
they know what the hell they're doing.
Right.
And then the flip side of that, of course, is you go to other locals where there may be one or two people that have a little bit of a clue, and then the rest are just,
Right.
inept and incompetent and drugged out and alcoholed out and
Right.
attitude out, and
Yeah.
and you can't get rid of them. And
You can't get rid of them.
well, screw that. Get this guy. No, I can't do that. Well, I'm not paying you because he's not. You're getting paid to do a job. The job isn't getting done. We're not paying you, and then of course all hell breaks loose. So,
Right. Right.
So
I think there needs to be some immediate feedback to each one of these locals every time we leave a city or every time we leave an environment. I think it needs to go up the food chain and say, I think the locals need to be held responsible for the ineptness of what they're bringing to the
but
table.
then there has to be some sort of consequence. If a local is constantly being complained about and constantly having these problems, what's the consequence for the local? Because the local has a contract with the building,
right?
And so the building by contract can't hire anybody else other than guys from the local,
right?
And even though they're terrible and they're crappy and everybody hates them, they still going to get the job because that's the contract. That's the deal that they made.
Well, that's why.
That's kind of the catch-22.
It is.
Where you know, you just say, well, screw it then, screw all unions, which isn't correct. Obviously, you can't say, you know, tar the whole
Right.
concept by the bad actions of
Right.
one or two things, one or
Right.
two people.
Right.
And then of course, the other thing that you talk about is, once again, this is by a different, varies from local to local. Some locals have active programs where they're bringing in younger people, bringing in people of color, bringing in women, and you know, training them up and having them start out loading the trucks, and then you come back a couple of years later and they're stage hands, and you come back a couple 3 years later and they're crew leaders, and that's great. That's the way it should be. And then other locals, like we said, then the flip side is you have the locals where it's the idiot son of the idiot, you know, the idiot, you know, bears 2 or 3 sons who are also idiots, and you get a whole crew of idiots. So
I think what we're talking about, Bill, is you're talking about America as it stands today.
yeah, yeah. I mean, this is a larger issue. I mean, this
It's a
isn't
much
just
bigger issue.
yeah. It's
What I
not
would
just
say is
about the IA. No.
what I would say is that our industry, the people in our industry are special, in my opinion. To do what we do, we have we're free spirited, right? We don't want to sit behind desk if we don't have to, or not for very long. But I think what has happened for the country and the planet is COVID-19 has hit the stop button on the tape machine.
Yeah.
And so we all collectively, industries, communities, all races have stopped. And so we have the opportunity to look at this, look at how we go forward in a different way. The difficulty is in doing this is that as we move forward, and they've had all these events that have been happening, because most people don't know our industry. What they see is the end result of our work.
Yeah.
They don't see us.
Yeah.
And so they don't know that we exist. And so when you look at the amount of money that our industry makes, I mean, it's $877 billion for entertainment and arts. We employ somewhere around 12 million people. 77% of those people are some percentage of that, or 77% approximately, are 1099 workers. So that means that there's no EDD. So how do we have this conversation when people are struggling to put food on the table, to put gas in there? And so this becomes a much larger picture. My hope is that we come out of this looking different, and we don't forget. I'm at the point in my life where I don't want to legislate, I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to vote about it, just change it. We need women in our industry, period. Stop talking about it, make it happen. I don't want to vote on it. It's like it just hasn't existed. I would much rather see young kids of color come into our industry versus getting pushed toward the dance side or the music side. We need the technical side too. Everybody doesn't need to be on the stage. Mm-hmm. And so by doing that, or by us going through this process, we have the opportunity to shift and change. We have an opportunity with these, I think it's called We Are Live. You guys saw these events that are happening where they're pushing cases, and here in San Francisco, we went out and photographed all the buildings that were turning red to raise awareness in our industry of who we are and what we do. When people go to a concert and they pick up a cocktail and they're looking at their favorite band, they don't see us. We're dressed in black, right? We are black. And when the lights go down, we disappear. The only time that they know we exist is when something goes wrong. So if we do a good job for us and a great day for us is when the show goes off seamlessly.
And nobody knows.
And no one knows.
Yeah.
And that means that the camera operator, the A2 that's rolling up the cable between every band, the lighting director that you never see, right? You never see that person. You never see the monitor engineer. And so it's but we love what we do, but we are a microcosm, in my opinion, of the whole country. So unions didn't give me an opportunity at all, ever.
Yeah.
whether it be the electrical union, the fire department. It wasn't open to us, period. And so there were all the lawsuits to just get the opportunity to get in. And so one of my pet peeves right now is that there are not enough women in our industry. And so I've been on a mission. We have a young woman that's working with us right now that is absolutely fantastic. And she's run into situations where she's all of 5'1", right? Maybe 5'1" with heels on if she wears heels, but she's tiny. And so they say, well, you can't pick anything up. It's like, that's why you got union hands for. You're the front of house engineer. You're the monitor engineer. And so my quest with her, while she's with us, is to make her pick up the book and learn as much about this industry as possible. Sometimes I said, are you ready for this? Because I'm going to give you everything I know. I recommend books to her. She was the only engineer in the 10 years or so or 12 years I've been with high tech audio. She's the only engineer that came to us and spent every day for 3 months on consoles. Now, this is a woman, right? We've offered this to everyone in the industry that knows who we are. If you've got a show in our area and you need some help or you need a little bit of time and we have it available, you can come and spend a couple of hours on a console if you got a show. People that know us, we've done this for a long time. And the time that I've been there and the time that the company's been around for 25 years, she is the only engineer who happens to be a woman that spent 3 months to learn every console we had, from the SD7 all the way down to the CL5 and the LS9. She did them all. And she did it in 3 months' time. And she was on her own, on her own free time. She didn't ask, like some of the union guys, am I getting paid for this? She did this on her own time. 3 months later, we hired her. And so my point is that that's what we need to do. We need people like that in our industry. It's not relevant what her gender is. What is relevant is her skill set. What most people don't know about this young woman is that she's a concert pianist. So she has an ear that's different, right? So she's an amazing engineer. And one day I'll probably be working for her, and I'm okay with that. And so we have this internship thing that we have in our office where I specifically go and look for women. And because this wasn't available when I started. There was nothing available when I started. And so if I have the opportunity to bring someone like that into our industry that has a massive love for what we do, because we're all strange people. We're crazy to do what we do. We do it when we do it because
not everybody works 16 hours a day, eats crappy food, sleeps
That's right.
in a coffin, and then gets up the next day and does it again.
That's right. And we're all crazy. But here's the thing. But here's the thing, is that what makes it worth it is that you do tons of shows a year, and you can, and I've experienced this with a lot of people, is that you stand and you go one show, it's like, this is what I do it for. That one show where everything, the lighting, the weather, the mix, the people, everything works. And that's what we do it for. So, and just to finish, it's like, diversity is hugely important, but diversity is hugely important for the whole country.
Yep.
And so what we're seeing in our business is that we're seeing that we are very much just like the rest of the country. We have the same dumb issues that happen where we think that women can't do the same job that a man can do in mixing a show, whether it be lighting director, whether she's designing it. It's irrelevant that she can't pick up a console. That's what you have union hands for. That's what you have forklifts for.
That's what you have 2 or 3 other people to help you for.
That's right. So you don't have to pick up the
Teams
console by yourself.
You don't have to pick it up by yourself. You get
Exactly.
3 or 4 guys to help you pick it up.
You never do. You never do it by yourself. So anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, those are before because I really do want to talk about diversity in the field and what our culture and community looks like. But right before we get there, if Alicia has anything to mention, I would be very curious to hear about her ideas on work security money income and things like that in her world. And if you want to use that opportunity to swing over back into diversity, we'll hit that right after.
Yeah, for sure.
The floor is yours.
My experience seems like a little similar to the young lady or the woman that works for Sydney, right? Starting in the house of worship, and I grew outside of my father's church. People loved what we were doing in our church, and then they were like, how can we do that at our churches, right? So then I kind of became like this freelance consultant. And at that time, I was young. I was on my parents' insurance, so that didn't matter, right? But what mattered was me learning the boards. So what I would do, I would go to Guitar Center every day, every single day, and learn a new board. And I would spend at least 5 to 6 hours there. Like, I legit put the work in. And that way, each space that I went to, no matter what board you had, analog, digital, I knew it. And then moving into another perspective, which is more, it sounds like more kind of like a union type deal, where there's an A1, A2. I ran into a couple of brick walls there because it came down to education or experience. On an application, it had the and or word. And then it came down to me and another white guy getting the same job. And because he had a bachelor's degree, but I had the experience, he got that position. So it was constantly fighting and having to train the people who actually got the position that I qualified for because of the experience, but because of my background and I looked different and everything else, it was always a challenge. And moving forward, it was just like literally putting my head down and continuously proving that I know what I'm doing, not coming in like a know-it-all, but technically being that team player. Okay, fine. I have to train this guy, whatever. You know what? You guys will see that I know what I'm doing. He doesn't know. Not saying that I wanted the next person to fail, because I've always put my best foot forward, even though I didn't want to train at some times. Mm-hmm. But pay has been a struggle. Constantly been getting paid, underpaid because of my perception or what I look like. I'm a small body. I can't lift things. I'm very similar to the
you are a little bit short. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like 100 pounds soaking wet, so people judge me and just look at me differently for a lot of different reasons, right? I'm like every bubble of diversity that you can grab. So it's always been a challenge, but one thing that has kept me alive in this business is being resilient. Like I'm always going to continue to prove myself, stay resilient, and try to stay positive no matter those brick walls that you kind of run into. So when I joined the team, the in-house of AV team within a school district, I realized, this was when I was at that crossing point to where I couldn't be on my parents' insurance. I got to figure out what the heck insurance actually is. What does it matter? I don't have any children, so like, now that I'm at that point, that's been a focus point for me. How can I retire from this, right? And that's what led me to a pivot as well. Not only was the technology changing, but I realized, okay, I got to retire at some point, or there has to be a career path, and it's not here because I hit a cap. And the only thing I could do within AV operating was kind of like either go on tour like you guys, and I didn't really want to do that, or just be comfortable with that pay cap and let everybody else continue to surpass me. And I wasn't okay with that. So I made the pivot to learn another facet of what we do, which is IT, and continue to grow the ladder. Like, it's just focusing in on where the industry is going and continuing to educate yourself. Like you said, there's a whole bunch of free stuff out there right now, from universities, from manufacturers. Just obtain as much as you can and really don't back down on the pay. It took me a long time to learn how to fight for myself and ask for that equal pay. And if they weren't okay with that, I was okay with walking away, because that's not where I want to be, right? I want to be in places where I'm valued, but also put food on my table. So it was very hard to learn and find that balance, but ultimately I got there. And it's an ongoing process. So, I mean, we just have to keep at it. And we have to connect with people like Sydney and Bill and people who actually want to see us here. Everybody's not like that. And when you run into those people who aren't like that, it's okay, because you know what? We'll get through those people. It's like, it's angering and it builds up all these emotions, but get past that. You know why? Because there's a Sydney, there's a Carlos, there's a Bill, there's a Jerry, there's people out there that are willing to give you the opportunity, but you have to be ready for that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And Alicia, you and I have been friends for, I don't care to count right now, but a handful of years. And we've always sort of like been this parallel of each other. And I think I can speak for both of us when I say, we've always been the youngest on the team. We've always been, usually the only woman on the team, and not using that to our advantage, to get where we want to go, and not letting any particular one person or thing stop us. I've sidestepped several times. Like, I'm not in the exact spot I had imagined, 6 years ago, but I love what I do, and I get to, help change people's, lives, for whatever that means. And I get to educate people and work on cool stuff. And I make enough money where I can save some, every month.
Exactly.
And like, that's a huge thing in our industry, is like, saving money is really hard if you are freelance 100% of the time. And at the same time, you're fighting for your right to be in the spot that you've earned. And so
I freelanced for so long, but while I was freelancing, I was a dishwasher. I worked at Subway. I worked wherever else I had to work. And when it was time for showtime, I'm going to load in the show. I'm going to load out. I'm going to pull my own weight. We're going to set this thing up. We're going to break it down, and we're going to do this all over again. But I'm going to go home and sleep for 2 hours, and I'm going to come back and do this again. Like, it's legit just grit, especially being a woman, a person of color. It's legit just full out grit, because what we do, like, in the moment, like, now that I am on technically a manufacturer, I love selling the experience, but there's nothing better than be running a show and everything is just going right, like Signy said, and you just get those goosebumps because it's just this experience, knowing that you're creating this experience.
So you're as crazy as we are.
Oh yeah, I'm just as crazy as all of you guys. I'm just a little bit younger and just trying to find my way as the industry continues to change. And one thing that I always did, no matter where I was at, whether it was freelancing with AV, in-house AV team, I always found a Sydney, whether he was black, white, whatever, but it was mostly an older gentleman. And you know what? I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to fight with this guy.
Hello?
I mean, Sydney, you're older than me. I'm not calling you old, but you're clearly a little older than myself. So that's always been my focus. They say, oh, young people, we need more young people in the industry. Yeah, we do, but we need to kill the ages crap. Like, I'm always looking for the person who's most experienced. Yeah, me and Sam, we know a lot. We vibe. We're great. We're doing things together. But we have to attach ourselves to the right people to continue to grow.
Right. And you, like, being able to identify those people is a huge skill that I don't even know how to teach that. Like, you just have to know when somebody's got a good vibe and when they're going to be able to help you, and like, make it your work to have a good working relationship, if not, and additionally, a friendship with them, because it will take you, this entire industry is network based, and that will never hurt you, having a good relationship with people. So I could really talk about this.
I want to jump on the ageism thing for a second, because that's a hot button.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Al Schmidt. If you don't know who Al Schmidt is, Al Schmidt has so many Grammys. I know Marine's on here. She could tell us how many, like a bazillion. Al Schmidt's been making records, iconic records, since the 40s and the 50s. Sinatra on, Capitol record. Al is 90. Al is revered. He is respected. He's still on top of his game. He still goes in the Capitol. He's still making records. There are people like him. There's people like Clear Mountain, Eddie Kramer. These people have gotten better with age. And these are the people who are laying the foundation of us. They might be in a different aspect of engineering, but we have Robert Scoville and people who are front of house icons. Carrie's one of those people with Pearl Jam. I mean, this does not end in the audio industry as you age. It's just when you decide to jump out of here. And I just think that we need to hold the people who have paved the path for us, that are continuing to teach us unbelievable skills, and are beautiful human beings that still have the same passion and fire in them right now as you do, Alicia. It doesn't go away.
Absolutely, it doesn't go away. People say, oh, she's young, and then younger people say, oh, he's old. What? Like, we can teach each other a lot of things, and if we just, it's kind of like the race thing. Oh, he's white, he's black. Screw it. We all learned something from each other.
Samantha, I want to just share something with you. A few years ago, this was like in the early 80s, and I was working at at Lawrence Berkeley Laboratories. And so one of the things that, and I say there's short time period, but I was in the audio industry then. And most of you know what Beachbreaker Babylon is, right? Everybody heard of that if you've been around
No.
for a while? Okay, so anyway, Beachbreaker Babylon was a big deal on the West Coast, and it just shut down. And so I was young, I was in my 20s. And at that time, the 19-inch rack standard didn't exist in our industry. Where it came from was the nuclear power industry.
Really?
Yes, because there was a thing called NIM modules, nuclear instrumentation modules, and these are modules that could connect various things. So there was a guy that I'm trying to remember his name, but he was the one that kind of took me under his wing. He worked there as well, and so that was where I first saw, as an example, a Crown amplifier. Crown wasn't big in the industry in those days. It was SAE. It was what was the name of that company? Anyway, I'll think of it in a minute. But it didn't exist. They flame linears used to call them. Phase linear amplifiers were around at that time. 19-inch racks didn't exist. And so I'm bringing this up because one of the guys that I met in that time, he was one of the scientists that worked on the hydrogen bomb with Oppenheimer. And so they had all these young graduate students. My job there was, we were on power supplies, right? We were on beam stability, right, for doing these high energy particle physics experiments. And so my job was with this crew of engineers and technicians that worked on beam stability. So this old guy was probably at that time in his 80s, and all the graduate students that were doing their PhDs and working on their dissertations and all their experiments, just poo-pooed this guy, just blew him away, right? Just talked to him like he was crazy. And for some reason, I liked this old man, and I would walk behind him and when I'd ask him questions, and as he was walking, he would talk and I'd take notes, and he'd look around and he said, "Son, what are you doing?" I go, "I don't want to forget," right? And so when you look at a system as big as an example, a heavy ion linear accelerator, it's a massive building, and it's lots of electronics, just like we have in audio. It's just power supplies, tubes, high energy, high voltage. It's all those things that we see in our industry was all there. And so a lot of the guys that were there were audio engineers. That's what they did on the side, right?
Interesting.
And so he would say, what are you doing? And I'd say, "I'm taking notes." And so I said, I can't conceptualize this whole facility. And so he put it on paper, and it was 3 components. It was an inductor, a capacitor, and a resistor. And he said, "This is what we're doing." And so from that point forward, as I talking to these old guys in the industry, and you start to learn how valuable their experiences are. And the way you learn that value is to ask the question and listen, right? And they exist in our industry. I mean, there are a ton of them. I mean, the guys that I work with at Sound on Stage, they've been doing it for a long time. And I mean, they're all over the place. And so we as a business have to take care of them and nurture them and hold on to that information that they're imparting, because they were there before things existed. I mean, one of the things that we don't have to deal with today in our business is we don't have to deal with ground loops. We just don't have to deal with it because they don't exist anymore, virtually, right? So I said this earlier, is that what we're talking about is a microcosm of what's happening on the planet, is that we don't, and what's happening in our country in particular, America, is that we don't value our senior citizens. We don't value the older folks in our business. My mother was a teacher, and I've always said that they should be treated like first responders. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not treated like first responders, and they are.
And
but I can guarantee you that if you ask some parents that got some 5 and 6 year olds that have had to do this homeschooling for the last 6 months, I guarantee you if there's a vote to make them first responders, there'd be a whole lot of votes in the up fashion that say, "I would do this." And so we have those veterans and those experienced touring individuals that are not coked out and not drugged out. We have those that have survived and have done really, really good things. And so, in my opinion, it's important for us as we move up in age is to turn around and grab somebody with you if they're willing to listen and put the work in.
Absolutely.
And there's one thing, something I'll say this and I'll finish, is that one of the most valuable things that we have right now is our time, right? We have time right now. We all have time. And we talk about learning. One of the tools of our trade that most of us overlook is math. And so there are a number of programs and places that we can go and do this. And so they giggle at me in my office because I do this math every day. And so part of this is like practice, right? One of the things that in our business is logarithms. And I can assure you that 95% of the people in our business don't understand logarithms. They just simply don't. If you don't use it, and if you don't practice, it's just, you just don't have it. And so what we have right now, the most valuable thing we have in our toolbox right now is our time. And it only takes 20 minutes, half hour a day, every day, to put the time in to do those things. Whatever that skill set is, you can learn this. And I have a book that says you can learn anything in 20 hours. You don't have to be an expert, but you do have to have a good grasp of it. And it just takes time. And that's what we have right now is time.
Good point.
Yes, absolutely.
Good point.
Yes, applause around. So we've been kind of talking about this, it's just been kind of this overarching theme, but before we get to the Q&A from people who have submitted questions, I want to talk just a few moments about what we can do if we all agree that we need a more diverse industry. I think we are all in agreement for that. Obtaining and recruiting those individuals is not necessarily the inherent problem. It's keeping these individuals in the field that seems to be an issue. So what can we all do to do that? How do we keep a diverse crowd in our industry? How do we cultivate that kind of community?
Well, one thing that we're about to do at Roadies of Color, one of our, we have a couple of three focuses. The first focus, and the thing that's like on the plate right now, is we're going to publish a database of qualified, vetted people. One of the constant remarks that we've received over the last few months in talking to other tour managers and production managers, well-intentioned tour and production managers who say, well, I'd be open to diversifying my staff. And in some cases, we've had tour managers tell us that their artists have specifically requested that they look into diversifying their staff. But I don't know anybody. I'd hire a black guy, but I don't know any black guys. I'd hire a qualified woman, but I don't know any qualified women. So we're going to put out a directory of qualified, vetted black guys and women, so that as a resource, so that in the hiring, people can no longer say, well, gee, I would be happy to, except I don't know where to go. Well, go to our database, and there you'll find you need a monitor guy. You need a front of house engineer. Well, here's a list of 2 or 3 who have resume, who have qualifications, and who we have vetted, who you might consider if you're looking to fill that position. So that's one aspect in terms of.
Yeah, and SoundGirls also has a directory for
Right.
women.
And there's a lot of directories out. There's a lot of directories out. Right. And I know SoundGirls does have one. If you're looking specifically for a woman, specifically for a sound girl, you can go to SoundGirls and find somebody. The other thing we're going to do is initiate a outreach program we're going to specifically target HBCUs, which is historically Black colleges and universities, and their theater departments, and to try and make young theater students who aware of the career opportunities available in the concert business and in the live entertainment, because they're already predisposed towards theatrical and entertainment, and maybe they're thinking they want to go to Broadway, or maybe they're thinking they want to go work in the film and TV industry, and they're certainly aware of concerts because they go to concerts, but they may not be aware that you can actually make a living doing the kinds of things that they're actually training to do. Right? I'm a theater guy. You know, when I was in college, I was a theater major, and I had a master's. I got a master's in lighting design, and I thought I was going to go work in theater, and then I didn't. And I ended up working in the concert business for the last 45 years. Prior to being introduced to that, I had no idea that it even existed. As like Sydney was saying before, we're all invisible, you know. So I didn't even know there was an industry, much less jobs and you know, a career that you could have in this business. So broadening access to people who are already qualified, and then feeding the tube, you know, and the feeding young people into the business, so that if you keep feeding young people into the business, then to answer your question, you're going to maintain some kind of representation over the long term. As us old guys, not you, Sydney, but I'll admit to being an old guy. And you are too, because you started at the same time I did.
I'm not old. Thank you.
Okay, but okay, well.
I think maybe also, you know, we can.
But you know, so I mean, there's a first generation. I kind of think of myself as a first generation concert business guy, because the concert business as a whole in my, you know, really didn't start until the late 60s and early 70s, when there actually became concerts and technology and gear that somebody had to move around, you know. But eventually there'll be a second and a third and a fourth and a 10th generation. So the trick is to keep feeding that pipeline. So at some future date in time, it's not an issue. It's not an issue if you're Black, white, male, female, LGBTQ or whatever. It's can you do the job? If you can do the job and you're available, then you'll go get the job. And that's obviously where we all want to end up at some time in the future.
Yeah, right. And I think as we've said many times in this, as the opinion and how we act in the rest of the country outside of our little industry, as that changes and gets hopefully better and more inclusive and all these things, and more accepting and more loving and things like that, it will affect our industry more. And then it will be, you know, my hopes is that in the not so far away future, that we don't have to think about this. We don't have to have a panel discussion on diversity or what, like,
about
you know,
roadies of color is we're working to eliminate the need for roadies of color, you know.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely. And
one of our
hopefully, you know,
is to eliminate the need for there to be an organization called Roadies of Color.
Absolutely. And so I think also kind of in tandem with this sort of idea of work security and you know, being able to have a life and a financial and a home and all these things. I think there are many, many facets to this, to keeping just lots of diversity, but also young people in this industry. It's really easy to get kind of burned out, stamped out, and kind of tossed out if you don't take care of yourself. And so really we could have a discussion, an entirely other discussion on just taking care of ourselves and taking care of others in our industry industry that would include everything that we've talked about today plus more. And so, keeping the industry diverse, when I was writing this part of the question down, I knew we were not going to spit out 2 sentences where I was like, well, that was easy. Like, I'm glad we fixed that, because it's so much more complicated than that. And it's hard. How do you keep anything diverse?
It's hard. And it's interesting because, Bill, you spoke to the college level, right? But I didn't go to college. Like, I don't have the traditional background. Like, where I'm from, nobody, like, the only way you go to college is if, like, you actually had parents that went to college and they wanted you to go to college, like where I'm from, most of my friends and myself, our parents didn't go to college. They don't know how to help us fill out financial aid or like where to even start. So
that's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, that's we decided to target HBCUs, not because we think it's the end all and the be all, but we wanted to just pick a focus that is kind of doable.
Right. Yeah, that's a great place to start. But let's take it a step back further. What about trade schools? Trade schools, they teach only studio. I went to a trade school, and nobody, like 6 years ago, you couldn't tell me that I wasn't going to be the front of house engineer for the Beyonce tour, right? That was what I wanted to do. And then I realized once I finished that program, okay, yeah, I know how to work all these different boards in a studio environment. One course was for live sound. And when you get out of there, they're like, okay, go find an internship at a studio. In Houston, Texas, it's a big city, but there's like, to get into a studio, you start, getting coffee or whatever. And I was like, okay, this isn't going to work pretty fast. So I was like, how do I get a job as an engineer? Oh, go work at a hotel. Wait a second. Okay. Now I'm doing front of house for, like all kinds of things that really weren't, revolving around music. Yeah. And then that's how I found AV. And I was like, wait a second. There's a whole industry that embraces sound engineers and all of these other awesome technical facets that create this experience that I love so much. Okay, let me see what this is about. And then I became in-house, and it was still the long hours and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, maybe there's something else in AV that I can do. And I kind of pivoted to still learn the technology and keep those technical chops, but just go a different way about doing it, which led me to designing and selling what we do. You know what I mean? So it's like, there's so many different ways in all of our facets to get
it to move in,
but nobody actually knows how, like, especially if you come from an environment or a background to where you don't even have these, everyday opportunities.
Well, one of the things I think that distinguishes we folk, you, me, Sydney, Sam, Jerry, and Carlos, as well as hopefully most of the people watching, is that you're self-motivated. I don't think that you can be in this business. You certainly can't last in this business. I mean, you can get in on a Hummer, but you're not going to last unless you're self-motivated. I mean, one of the overarching themes here that you shared, Alicia, and Sydney, you shared in how you got into the business is you figured it out. You were self-motivated and said, well, this is something I want to do. Let me just keep pecking away at it till I figure out a way to get in. And I think that's one of the things that makes us as an industry unique, is that you do stumble in, but you don't stay in.
Yeah,
most
don't
everybody
unintentionally
stumbled in. I'm one of the few people I know who actually had a direct, went to college, went to school, got a job as a stagehand, and went on the road. So I was pretty clear from an early age what I wanted to do, but that is unusual. Most people come to this business kind of by hook and by crook. They have a van and their buddy is in a band and they want to use his band to haul the gear to the gig, and then they discover that this is a job, and but I don't think you stay in this business unless you are self-motivated, and unless you do kind of push yourself, or at least remain open for opportunities that that come your way. And I think that's one of the things I appreciate about the people I work with every day.
Yep.
Is that, you know, everybody has a desire to move and to put themselves in a position to, you know, there's not a lot of people that are just mailing it in. People that are mailing it in usually don't last. I mean, we've all been in situations where we worked with somebody who was just mailing it in, but, you know, a year or so later, that person is probably not around anymore. So
Yeah.
how do you get it? You know, so there are training programs, there's trade schools, there's
But Bill, let me just say this. In my experience with, when you talk about training for our industry, we are, as I understand it, a $38 billion industry. So we're $38 billion of this $877 billion of entertainment and arts. So when you look at our business from the perspective that we're talking about right now, is there's a bunch of trade schools and there's a bunch of recording art schools. And so I've had the opportunity to teach at some of those schools. The thing that is, in my opinion, that's missing is you get a young graduate out of one of these schools, and some of the things that they're taught are not specific to our industry. They don't work. Half of them don't even know how to roll cables. So when you start to look at this and put it in a business perspective, is that what we're actually teaching them to be, if they're not an electrical engineer, if they're not a mechanical engineer, then that means that they're going to be an applications engineer, right? They're the end user. So if you're going to be a front of house engineer, you're going to mix for broadcast, you're going to mix for the recording studio, you're going to mix live, or you're going to be doing monitors, or you're going to be mixing for radio. So those are application specific things. And so one of my pet peeves about all of these schools is that you need to have, as an engineer, you need to have a bunch of skills. You're the end user for that console. And this is one of my pet peeves with the manufacturers, is that you design something into a console. Did you ask the application, the person that's actually going to be using the console, if this is going to work for me? Are these controls, are these angles going to work? And what you see is the manufacturers catching up afterwards on a console. The console angle is incorrect for the sun. So when you're at a concert and they take that canopy away, now you can't see the screen. The touch screen doesn't work because they didn't ask the application engineer, what do you think, to send the beta unit out. So I'm saying all this to say is that I think when we talk about how do we restart and how do we push into a different direction, is that maybe what needs to happen in these schools is that it should be an application specific things, right? Mm-hmm. So you end up really being, it becomes, in my opinion, an applications program. So you have to wait for the engineer to learn how to go, they have to go to a sound company to learn how to rig a speaker system, right? And then you go from rigging a Nexo system to an L acoustics, and they're different. And so, or what's the difference between split phase, which doesn't exist, by the way, and three phase. And so it's those kinds of things that these engineers are going to be, these application individuals are going to be exposed to. And so a program, in my opinion, should include all of those things. I did a program, I taught a program a few years ago, and it was maintenance for 24-track machines. And so these engineers were like, why do we have to know this? And I'm like, I said, where do you work now? And he goes, I work as an assistant at a recording studio. And I go, then you need to know how to do this. And they didn't want to learn because they thought that they were just going to get to the mix part of it. So, so that program, in my opinion, was flawed in what they were presenting and what they were trying to say. Well, we want to be a live engineer, but none of them got any exposure to live. Everything they did was in a recording studio. Mm-hmm. Those that wanted to be in broadcast, they never got a chance to understand what it means to do a broadcast. They had no idea.
That's exactly what happened to me. That explains the exact program. But Sam, not to cut you off, but I want to hear Carlos' perspective because it's like
Yeah,
a
that's actually what I was about to say was I haven't heard from Carlos in a while. So
different
before we get to the Q&A, there's like 2 questions that people have been, I want to make sure you guys get a chance to answer. But Carlos, yeah, you've been a little quiet. Do you have anything?
I'm a good listener, apparently. So, yeah, well, I went to a engineering school in the UK. Fortunately, we have different approaches. We have the live part, we have the recording part, we have the production part. We have it was very broad, and actually that's why I went there, because it's very awesome. But I'm more concerned about the diversity and inclusivity part, because to me that's more important. So what I've experienced here in the US after coming from the UK, I've been here for 6 years, and I got educated. I didn't know about.
Hey, Carlos, really, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you pop that other ear on? Because I think that your mic is hanging off of that, and then it rubs. All right, perfect. Okay. Sorry, go on, continue.
Okay. So, oh yeah. So to me, wait, this is uncomfortable. Is it still rubbing? Is that okay? Okay. It's cool. Yeah, so to me, I've been lucky, to be honest, in a way that I've been surrounded by good people, but I know it exists, but I needed to be educated because I didn't know this was like a huge thing. So it was my fault. I went to school, I went all of that, but I've experienced things I didn't know what it was. Like, for example, the imposter syndrome, like imposter phenomenon, which happens. It's just like, I don't know there was a thing. And then realize, oh, I can see it now. I can see people is being going through that. And I can just support it, and I know what's going on, and not because you're a minority, you don't deserve what you have done, but it's normal. I've experienced that, and awareness is important. Look around, like what's going on around you. That's very, very important. Like the app that I designed for the visually impaired people, it was because I have a friend that is struggling with that. I met with her and I saw what was going on. Like, how do you do this? Like, how do you get outside? And she was like, no. And I didn't think about that. I know blind people exist. I know they struggle, but I didn't know how much they struggle. So it's like, I can do something about it. I know about technology. I know, maybe, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm not into biology a lot, but I can use technology to help her to go outdoors and make her feel comfortable about it. So it's just like be aware of what's going on around you. It's all about empathy. It's about being a human being. That's what we need right now. We don't. Yeah, technology is awesome. All of that is awesome. But what is most important is like what we have around and how to help other people. Because I'm fine. Like I do what I love. I try to do as best as possible. I'm surrounded by a company where it's diverse and they support me and I support them. It's fine, but I'm not the only. I'm the minority in that terms as well. So I have to know that there's people out there that is struggling. So that's what we need. That's all what we need.
Yeah,
Carlos,
absolutely.
Carlos, I have a question for you.
Just one though.
And I just want here's something that happened to me a couple years ago, and it was I got sent to Mexico City to babysit when the Pope came to South America, and so part of the babysitting thing was we weren't sure, quote unquote, how good the engineers were in Mexico City. To my astonishment and to my surprise, they were some of the best engineers I'd ever met. I mean, they were amazing, from the system tuners to the mixers to the Mexico's Secret Service. They have a sound division in their Secret Service, and they were amazing. And everything from triple redundancy in their power, right? Because in Mexico City, they take over the broadcast when the president speaks to the country. And so there was this switchover. They wanted redundant SD7 consoles, if you can imagine. So anyway, it was an amazing experience. My question to you is that coming from outside the US and coming into America, have you experienced what we've been talking about in terms of issues with who you are, and the response to Americans to you as a man of color?
That's a good question, and you're gonna make me put me in trouble. But welcome
to our world.
Yeah.
I've seen it. I experienced it mostly in the film scoring industry. I actually came here at the beginning of the film scoring industry, where it's not about music, it's about time and money. And it's very white male driven, which is fine. I just like, I don't have to educate them. You have to, I had to show them that I'm good. I'm good, that I can do the job, and you have to be strong. And I could do the job. It was fine. The problem is, the problem is talking about unions, is union driven as well. I feel in this personal that you can only, if you need to join a union, it's because they don't treat you well. That's my only reason. If they don't treat you well, you don't have to be there. Like, there's no need for you to be there. So I moved to a different company, to a different industry, now in the life industry, and I felt more comfortable because I believe there's more diversity, and they understand that you can be good too, even though you're not American or white or whatever. And I felt comfortable, and still feel comfortable. I work for a company where there's people from everywhere, and they understand that. So as a mixing engineer, I believe you have to prove that you're good. And here, in California, I think I haven't felt it that bad.
Good, it's good for you, because one of the things that we've, that I'm sure everyone in this panel has experienced is, and I can speak from my personal experience, is that I had to be significantly better, and it still didn't work. You still had to push cases.
Yeah.
I've been in so many situations where, particularly if and all of us have done live shows where you've got generators involved, right? And so one big issue for me, because I grew up with a father that was an electrical contractor, that was my beginning, and my forage into this journey into audio was his best friend was an engineer with Pacific Bell before they broke him up into AT&T. So that was my beginning. And so we're on this show, and it was a generator issue, and I'm like, this is kind of dangerous. There's no grounding. And because I wasn't the guy, no, it's okay.
Did you have the generator grounded?
No. I mean, well, we're 2020, right? We're talking 1986, and it's like, you guys, the generator is 150 feet away from the stage. We're in the middle of a city. Anything can go wrong here. We need to ground this generator. It's fine. And because I wasn't the guy, they didn't believe me. They poo-pooed it until somebody got shocked. And it was a dangerous situation because we were there at 7 o'clock in the morning, as an example, and the guitar player for the first band wanted to check out his new amp. So he ran a cable to the local store, 50, 60 feet away. And no one ever unplugged that and plugged him into the generator. So of course, when he had his fingers on his strings and his lips on that SM58, he got the shock of his life. But they didn't listen.
Literally.
Right, he did. And so I've run into the situation so often that it just got to be a drag, because it's like, you don't know what you're doing. First of all, you don't understand the process. And so I'm telling you this, but because I'm the A2 I was probably an A3 or A4 by their standards. It doesn't matter. We got this. We do this all the time. And so I'm saying this to say that we, as people of color and women, we always have to be 10 times better.
And that's fine. I mean, I don't
and it is. And to a large extent, that's great. Right? unless until you don't get paid the same amount of money as
That's
the
the
other guy.
issue.
I
Right.
had a guy just last year, after 30 years in the business. This was a vertical business. Everyone knows me in NFL and NBA and all the live sports, and I was recommended for the esports gig, and I had quite a few esports things under me, but this crew of people that I worked with didn't know anything about my background or anything about me, and one of the guys that I worked with would never look me in the eye, and he would always go, "So Jerry, you need some hand holding?"
Wow.
I was like, no, no. But
Tell him to kiss your grits.
You can lick me right here if you want. Well, we need to route this kind of stuff over. Okay. Don't talk to the sound designer. And I was like, well, the sound designer designed everything. So, will you talk to me? And I was like, okay. So I would talk to him, and I go, how do you want me to route this? Well, I don't know. I'll have to get back to you. So I gathered all of our crew, and I said, okay, this guy's playing games. I said, let's just go, I said, but we're all going to work together, and we're going to work with our sound designer, and life will be good. But he couldn't even look me in the eye, and this is 30 years in.
But that's
right? And I was the A1.
That's my point. Like, I feel satisfaction. Like, when I say I told you so, and you don't listen to me just because my English is not perfect or I'm not white or something. That makes me work harder. And if I work harder, I'm doing it right. I don't need anything else. I'm doing it right. And that's what drives me to do what I'm doing. So yeah, I have to work harder, but I'm glad I have
it shouldn't be that way. And
it shouldn't be that way. But we have to
correct.
But we have to educate people. The problem exists. We cannot take out the problem.
The thing is that we've been educating them for 150, 200 years.
And we have to still educate them.
And I'm done educating at this point. It's like, just
when you quit educating, there's nothing else. No, we have to educate people.
If I could jump in here, Carlos. Well, you know what? Well, I'm in between the two of you, Carlos. You're coming in and still fighting the fight, and those it's valid. Please don't get me wrong. I am certainly not marginalizing your input by any stretch. You still have hope at this point.
Yes, that's what we need. That's the only thing that we need.
Well, and we need to still talk about it and still keep trying. But those of us that have been doing it for 30, 40 years, and we still run into this crap, it starts to get.
I have 34 years. I still need to work on it. You know, like
hopefully
you need to reach our level of cynicism.
Yes.
Of jaded cynicism. Carlos, you're still young. You haven't reached our level of jaded.
So should I quit? Yeah. My question is, should I quit?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely.
So that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
But what they are saying, Carlos, is that
there's a difference between accepting it and doing something about it, and quitting. So that's
and it does need to change. The point that we're trying to make, that Sydney and Bill and I are trying to make, is that we've been doing this a very, very long time, and it's not, we keep talking about it getting better. It's all cha-cha-cha. It's all talk, and it's not. Yep. And the point is that it has to start getting better. And to go back to what you were talking about, Carlos, everyone knows I do a ton of these things. I say this motto and everything that I do, and people will get tired of hearing it, is that I go where I'm celebrated and not where I'm tolerated. And if I'm really running into these walls financially, progressively in my career, and I see that everyone's out to get you, I do find a place where I can succeed and excel, and I start to move myself out of the poisonous, toxic environment.
Yeah. I wish we could. It feels like there's so much work to be done. I think I completely understand. I have days where I'm very tired of trying to explain to people that people deserve human rights. I'm very tired of having the conversation. I feel like I shouldn't have to, but in the same way, like Carlos, I'm still also recognize that I'm young enough that I can't not have these conversations. It would be really easy to block everybody who was an idiot on the internet. I could totally do that and be fine. And I especially as a white individual make a conscious effort to have those conversations with these idiots, because I don't want the burden to be on somebody else, or the people that come behind me, or the people that are with me. So it sucks for me. Yes. I hate seeing that I may make less than somebody else, or somebody who is of color makes less than somebody else. Like, there's so many layers to this. And I understand being jaded and not wanting to have this conversation. And I also understand that we cannot and should not give up. And
Yeah.
so,
I mean, we're all here. I mean, as
still here.
cynical as Sydney and I are, we're sitting here, we're talking.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so,
Here we are.
you know, as sort of the, you know, there's at least one Q&A question that I really want to ask. I just say this, is that I've worked very hard to get to the position that I am, or the positions that I hold. And I do my best every day to make sure that I'm cultivating a diverse community, and I'm helping push this industry forward. I have the ability to do that. And I hope that I can speak for everybody else who's on this, not just, you know, as a panelist, but everybody's on this call, that we're all making those very conscious efforts until they no longer have to be conscious efforts. So I will say that. One of the like biggest questions we got as far as when people were registering was about live streaming, which we touched on a little bit. But will live streaming events last even when back to business as usual, if that's a thing, or will they pick up more? And who is getting these jobs now? Does anybody have any opinions?
Well,
on
ask
that?
Facebook.
Alicia,
Facebook.
Yeah, ask Live Nation. I heard a thing on Squawk Box, CNBC, the financial channel, and one of the things they talked about is they basically, one of the presenters basically divided the industry into three buckets. One was the recording side, one was the live streaming side, and the other side was the live. And so of those three buckets, one is at zero. The one that is still running is live streaming, and it's not going away. And I think for those of us that are in this industry, it's really difficult if you want to know who the players are and how they're making money, what direction they're going in. A key to that is looking at Live Nation because they're publicly traded. So they have to be open, they have to disclose to their investor group. So you can see the focus of where they're going. You can see how they handle their venues. You can see how they deal with compliance, and you can see the direction of their business, and you can also see the diversity of their business. And so in this current environment, the live is virtually at zero. The one that is making money and that is moving and technology still working is live streaming. And that's my opinion. But I will say this, Samantha, is that I left the industry 3 or 4 times because I was like, kiss my grits, I've had enough. And I left, went back to some other technology that I had skills in, decided to learn how to teach and do all those things. But as you leave and come back, yeah, I drank from the same Kool-Aid and I do the same drugs. This business is a drug. And so I came back every time. Yeah. And I'm back again, and I won't leave again. But it's changed, but the progress is super slow. However, that being said, is that I think for anyone that's watching this, if you really want to understand our business and get a glimpse of what it is who's at the top of the market, right? You with privately traded company or privately owned companies, you don't know the financials. You just simply don't know. But a look into the financials of our business and the direction of the business is Live Nation, right? Just as an example, is you can look and see where the business is headed. Where are they going? They're surviving in this environment right now. And you go to their home splash page, and live streaming is right on the front page.
Absolutely.
If you look at their quarterly reports and their annual reports on how they're doing financially and what their focus is, that's what we need to look at as an industry. Where are they looking? Where do we put our technology? Where do they think it's going to be in 5 years? That's my opinion.
I have, like, if I can, I may add something. I wouldn't go to Burning Man, never. Burning Man to me is like so overwhelming and so many people. And
welcome to the party. I wouldn't go either.
But
plus you got sand in your armpits and everywhere else.
Yeah, but I joined the VR experience of Burning Man, the festival they made in VR this year, and now understand how it works. Like what could I take from it? Like how the social experience it is. Of course, there's no sound. I was easily in my living room. It was awesome, but I understood. I was able to experience or to get closer to that experience. So now I'm thinking of going. So my point is like I think there's enough market for both sides. Like I would like to stay at home. I don't want to go. I don't want to make lines. The parking place is a pain in the ass in arenas and all of that. So I can be at home. I can join a concert. I've been to concerts in VR at home, but I love being in the arena as well because it's two different experiences. But it's still streaming. It's still concerts. So we can make both work. We can make the ones at home more realistic. We can have a really nice professional PA system at home and kind of get that feeling as well. Or we can go to the concert. So I think we're living in we're transitioning in a world where maybe it's fine to be at home too. Is to get new experiences at home, and that's what we're trying to do right now. That's my point. That's
right. I can tell you, I've gone to Burning Man.
Oh,
and
yeah?
my clothes remained on the whole time. I'm just saying.
Yeah, but did you get sand everywhere?
Oh, you get sand absolutely everywhere. Here's the thing about to jump on this with Carlos is that, and it's the same for the live environment. We're talking about what you get when you're standing there in front of somebody that's sweating and they're doing their thing, right? Or whatever it is. It's a little bit of a different experience when you're in the arena live. And when you go to Burning Man, the thing about Burning Man is that you watch multi cultures of people come together with no judgment. It's the only place I've ever gone where there is no judgment. You have your Christians camp, you have your wild camp, you have your crazy camp, you have your druggy camp, you have whatever camp. I was in the middle, I was going as like, what is this? But people truly relied on each other for survival. And there was no judgment and there was no commerce. And everyone got along. In my humble opinion, when you go live to Burning Man, it's not about the drugs and, oh yeah, there's dust and it gets 120 in the day and it might get down to 40 at night. And there are certain things you have to do to survive, but it forces you as a community to disregard color and culture and everything and come together for survival. And it's a beautiful experience. And when you leave that playa, there's not one stitch of that playa. Trash, there's no garbage, there's no waste of food. On the way out, they have food banks. They have trucks waiting to take any excess food that was not used, and it gets donated. So
how does that Jerry, how does that transfer? Excuse me for interrupting you, but how does that transfer to a live stream?
Because there's no way you could get that from a live stream.
Yeah,
there's no way you would get that. You can enjoy watching, but you're not going to be part of the experiment of having to rely on each other and all of the guards. And it's a beautiful thing if you only do it once, because all of these problems that we're talking about in diversity go away at Burning Man. They truly go away.
To answer the question a little bit succinctly, is that the people who are doing the streaming gigs right now are people who are they're probably relatively high up in their company, so they are not part of the furloughed crew. They already have experience doing it. That's who's doing it. It's not the college graduate like fresh out that's doing it right now. And as far as streaming in the future, I from my point of view and all of my work in the different ways that I'm in this industry, it's only hurried what was inevitably already happening. It will not 100% ever be streaming. Like, this is a Band-Aid. We're all just trying to survive and make it happen. There's nothing like, as Jerry was explaining, there's nothing like experiencing something in person, in the flesh for yourself. There's nothing like it. So there's going to be a lot more broadcast mixing and surrounds, and there's just going to be more of those jobs now, because people are used to it suddenly. So
there's also I've been so huge on live streaming since the first time I did it, right? Like when me and my dad figured out what the heck streaming was, it was right, not only from a perspective of community, but because we could collect an offering, we could have praise and worship, and everybody, it was this whole full-blown thing. But then I also remember the first time that I saw the Beyonce experience. I wasn't old enough to go to a concert, so I streamed it. And it was just like, you know what I mean? Like, what's gonna happen is streaming is gonna get better and better. And there's technology out there right now that's including like all augmented reality into these experiences to where we all seem like we're kind of in the same space. And there's a bunch of artists coming together and being in the same space. So what I'm interested to see with streaming now is because I've always loved streaming. But what I'm excited about is integrating these other technologies into it to heighten this experience. We're not going to get that same experience that we did live. There's nothing that's going to beat it. But live is going to come back, right? We already see it. Like people are doing shows on stages and people are watching from their cars. Like you have the drive-through movie theaters coming back. People are choosing to go to the movie theaters, right? It's going to become a choice. Do you want to go out and maybe risk your health? We don't know. That's on you. But at the end of the day, you can stay home and still get a great experience as well. So streaming is just going to continue to get better and better and integrate the technologies we love that are going to make it to where if you don't want to go out, you don't have to. I know that we're at a standstill from the live side right now, but it's going to come back. It's going to come back. I don't see stadiums packed like they were back in the day or anything like that, but it's going to come back and it's going to be a choice. And streaming isn't going anywhere. It's just going to get better.
Yeah, I agree. And also all of these gatherings, particularly an event like Burning Man where there's 30 or 40,000 people, it's actually a very dangerous
they don't have a choice.
Undertaking right now. This is not something that we can, it's so much like the stadium thing. I don't even know when that could ever happen that way again. For now, anyway.
Yeah.
So.
But eventually, I mean, we really don't think this pandemic is going to last for the rest of our, lives or for 100 years. So at some point, we'll, I think, return to some semblance of where it was. They have these 70,000 seat stadiums. The people who own them aren't going to leave those seats empty forever. They might have to leave them empty for a year or two, but they're not going to leave them empty for the next 30 or 40 years. But what will happen is the pandemic will have forever changed sort of the protocols of live experience. I think it'll be years where, let me put it this way, social distancing, when this whole thing comes back, will be hugely in effect. And over time, we're at 25% capacity, 50% capacity, 60%, 70, 80, whatever, however long that takes, a year or two.
Unless you live in Florida.
But we'll eventually get back. I think what we will never lose, though, is the awareness that disease and viruses that can be communicated in close proximity. So things like, taking the temperature before you come in. I'm sure we'll be stuck with taking everybody's temperature, some sort of like a walkthrough thing like they have at the airports for X-ray for, to go through TSA. I'm sure somebody will invent some sort of
There's kiosks for that. There's all kinds
where
of
you walk
digital
through
signage kiosks, temperature, where they take you walk up to the kiosk, takes your temperature, scans you,
Yeah, well, I mean, they already have that technology at some airports where you just walk up, camera looks at your face. If you got a fever, they shoot you over there. If you don't have a fever, you move on.
Yeah.
I think we'll be living with those kinds of protocols for, a couple, 3 more years.
Yeah.
But as everybody agrees, there's nothing that can take the place of the live experience. Live streaming is here to stay. Absolutely. It'll get better, but there's still nothing like being in the same space with a community of people experiencing the music or the art that's being produced in real time in front of your face.
Nothing like a good
There's
rage.
just nothing else that, at least in our lifetime, and hopefully in my lifetime at least, that can't be supplanted.
There would be a good rage or a good burn if you're a burner.
Yeah.
Well,
that's what Burning Man people call themselves. They call themselves burners.
Okay.
This has been an amazing conversation, and I want to thank you guys so much for being here and willing to have this kind of, we're just really scratching the surface, but beginning it. And, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So thank you guys. Thank you for everybody who's still on and still watching. Thank you for everybody who's on YouTube and Facebook later watching this. I hope you guys found it informative. Please always feel free to reach out. I'm sure you guys are all okay if you receive emails or chat on the ProSoundWeb forums or the SoundGirls Facebook group. Reach out and never think that we don't, how do I say this? We have all of the power right now to make the future of our industry look like how we want it to. We just have to decide that we want to do it. So thank you guys for all being here.
All right.
You're welcome. Thank you. Appreciate the invitation.
Thank you.
It's a great meeting everybody, you guys.
Likewise.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah.
I'm gonna follow, connect with all of y'all on LinkedIn. Is that where everybody is? LinkedIn? Is that a good space?
Facebook, IG.
Or
No, MySpace. You should use MySpace.
MySpace.
MySpace.